of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 75. Russ was nervous. He'd been gloating, teasing, an irresistible biotic shockwave of insistence. What he really was, now, involved being critically and unconditionally nervous. More than he had been as a still too tall fledgling, considering how to act around girls when his real problems had been about how to act around boys and why he was having that headache. He'd known how to act around Garrison, now he didn't know. Or he didn't have to act. Or did he? He'd realized he did need to be away from the farmhouse for a little while because he required time to figure out everything. Plus the look on Kara's face about the table thing. He'd thought a bit further on it and realized that Kara was probably picturing Kimmon barging in, and that had changed his mind. He was experiencing patches of blue flare that rose up on his spine and the tips of his fingers. He kept muttering, "Sorry," to nobody as they happened. They would live at the farmhouse, but, oh, spirits, but. He reflected on his initial ebullient insistence, which he still didn't regret, but now he wanted to apologize for that pity clone thing. Maybe that comment had been a little too honest in too many ways to mention or take back. Sennar had been able to sacrifice himself because everyone else would let him do it, the way he arranged it. In some ways, Russ would have been alone for an immortal lifetime because everyone else would let him do it. But those people had unanimously chosen a different way, because he had been so often the loyal, clueless. It had been done for love, not pity, but there was a morass of guilt, of knowing relative priorities, knowing his place in any pecking order, the same way Sennar had known his, known it so completely that the crucible had made inevitable sense, and they had all fallen like fated dominoes. Being able to be with Garrus 2.0 involved the permission of his Ava and miraculous intervention of a god. It had been a matchmaking gift, something dropped in Russ's lap that he would never let go. The comment had been about pity in Russ, but maybe now it sounded like the clone was pitiful, and it was clearly his knowledge of the pecking order. Everyone else rushing into the silence he wouldn't allow to back him up for the one moment he needed. He closed his eyes and sighed. Maybe he couldn't be the same guy that acted a certain way at all, because this changed a man more than the end of Reapers. Not just the right to be with Garrus, the knowledge that 4 people had aligned again toward a conclusion not possible alone, fallen like dominoes. Sennar had sacrificed himself, then they had all sacrificed unique personhood for Russ. Yeah, theoretically other people benefited, but not as much. Sennar had known well enough to have Kara watch their faces, have Kara see the inevitable bloom of blue and need in Russ, as though she would say no after that. It would have been impossible. Sennar asking for himself would not have been as effective. Ambush. On the scale of shit that's gonna change a man, these facts qualified. Now there was no pecking order. There were 3 matched and mated pairs that were otherwise impossible. Russ never had to experience himself outside those intimate circles of devotion again. Spirits, don't let me be a complete and babbling fool. I've managed babbling already, but I might escape complete if I don't trip over my tongue too many times or be unable to look at the guy, or if I can't stop looking at him. So now he was waiting. Still on Sanctuary, Sinar had taken Kara and Garrus into a Reaper to finish his science projects. 2 weeks ago, Russ was now waiting in one of several Turian-friendly sites appended to the Boomstick, the affectionate name of the complex for weapons testing, a place where Russ and Garrus spent a lot of time together. Seemed fitting. More fitting than awkwardly meeting around the farmhouse table, everybody staring at each other and asking, "So, how are you?" His answer? "I'm unpredictably blue and otherwise having no idea except do not pounce on the man at first sight." There had been no questions about supervision of Sinar because, really, what would they be supervising exactly? It all required iron trust after what they'd accomplished together had included mistrust and mutiny in turns. Russ understood the math. An extra Kara meant Garrus no longer worried about Sinar stealing, fascinating, or monopolizing her one way or the other. Sinar already had a her. An extra Garrus meant that Russ had yelled really loud. What had he learned? That dreams come true if you're either really, really patient or really, really loud? Maybe both. He needed some of that patience now, but the insides of his head and body were too loud. He'd be patient because he'd known there was absolutely no way. And that had been a solid place to be. Now that place was boiling over and unstable. Russ had made a good start at pacing a hole in the floor, covering in. And there was a knock at the door. Was it locked? He'd left it unlocked. It didn't lock automatically, he knew. He'd assumed Garrus would walk in and he was frozen. The knock happened again, and Russ rushed to the door, wondering if it would be Sinar. Something went wrong. Someone changed their mind they couldn't go through with it. He felt coldly stable and even comfortable in that absolutely no way place, considering reversion to that mental space for a vertiginous moment. But he did answer the door, prepared to face whatever was there. It was Garrus, alone. He stared, wondering still if he was here to tell him that there had been a change in plans. Garrus tilted his head and said,
"You okay?"
Russ was frozen in expectation of breaking news, breaking hearts, as he said, "I'm okay. Door was open. Didn't come in. I guess I'm expecting formal bad news."
"My arrival's bad news?"
"Is it?" Garrus took a deep breath and let it out.
"Not from my point of view. Maybe we should have worked out hand signals, or I could have worn a name tag. I'm a duplicate, ask me how. And then I could say I really have no idea, but still, might have helped with anxiety."
Russ's throat went dry and he stared. Garrus smiled. The sense of stun persisted until Garrus said,
"Changed your mind?"
"What? No, I don't quite believe it."
"Door open, inside, or do you want to come out and take a walk?"
"I have absolutely no idea what I want." That was such a lie. He wanted to tackle him.
"Okay."
Garrus moved in past him and took the door, closed it gently.
"Chair. Find one."
Garrus steered him to a chair and Russ sat down heavily.
"You're a wreck?"
Russ nodded.
"Thought you might be."
"Yeah,
"Yeah."
good guess. I wanted to say that I'm sorry about that whole pity clone thing,
You look pretty pitiful to me. Seems fitting.
yeah, we didn't get much of a chance to talk.
No, not about this. Seemed weird since we'd get a chance now.
Seemed weird. Yeah.
Not that us being together is weird.
From my point of view.
Well, I think you're looking for the word impossible, not weird.
Do you want to talk about it? Them? I mean, there's another you, and your chosen bondmate with another him, and
We can talk about it, sure. Weird and impossible, now possible. Funny feeling, thinking that I didn't know who I would wake up as, and I guess he's feeling the same way. I'm different. I asked Sonar to remove the bonding chemistry from me. Well, him. Okay, give me a few weeks to get pronouns and tenses right.
you what? It seemed impossible, but there was more shock.
Turned out he could do it. We can bond. Are you having second thoughts? I should ask.
What? No, no, I didn't think that was possible, or that you'd.
That I'd what? You know what? Never mind. Don't answer that. Breathe instead. Breathe for a minute. Breathe for a few minutes. If I'm right and you're trying really hard not to flare, you don't have to. You can flare away. It's just me.
I'll try breathing, but I'm not sure if I can stop flaring with you in the room.
Kinky. I'm not leaving, so you'll just have to figure it out.
I can't believe you're here.
I can't believe I'm 2 weeks old.
Russ laughed, sat back, lightheaded. Did set off a voluntary flare to clear his nerves, which didn't help because the additional charge of the last 2 weeks plus the added possibility of bond crawled right back up his spine with redoubled intensity. He did breathe. Then he said, I think giving oxygen to the biotics is a mistake. Garrus laughed, and Russ realized, what the hell do I call you?
Pity clone isn't going to catch on?
I said I was sorry.
Don't be. It was convincing. You haven't thought about it?
It's gonna be your name.
Yeah, but you'll be using it. You really haven't thought of anything? I find that hard to believe.
I did, but
Spill.
might not surprise you to believe that I've imagined you. Often. What's his name stared at him as though to point out the blatantly obvious and said,
I imagined you slept with Vicarians so you could imagine.
and I'm still only sleeping with the Vicarian.
Who was a fanning a few weeks ago. Okay, continue. So this imagination of yours?
I always called you R. Always. I will. I know. R. That's your name. The only one that's mattered to me anyway.
So call me that.
I was thinking maybe I'd build up to the ridiculously possessive. Maybe wait on the confession of the reality that I've done it since I was 15.
It's not ridiculous. I wasn't thinking that we'd date other people. We did this to spend time together, not just you. I made a choice too, just couldn't talk about it until now because we knew we'd be separate. Sonar and Kara did the same thing. They didn't talk about it, they just made the choice. Now we've done it. You want to call me R? Do it. Yeah, maybe in public it's, hey, call me R, short for RM. That could be my new name. What does that mean again? My mom would kill me if I forgot the meanings of all the names. Don't tell her.
RM. Taurian warrior, thousands of years ago. Popular name because he had united his clan with 4 others. Alliances were not easy then. Not like they were easy now. Russ said hollowly, doesn't it mean uniter without blood or something?
I'm technically more of a divider with blood in punctured holes.
Russ said, All right. Okay. Ah, his heart skipped. It felt like his biotics were going to envelop and then stop his heart. Oh well, die happy. Just not die happiest. Hold on a little while longer, please. Right. Won't die. I'll be back in 2 weeks apologizing again. Maybe with a name tag. RM looked at him, saw Russ clutching the armrests, and he continued to talk.
My last job's obsolete because, Reaper God has control of the Citadel. Not only am I unemployed, but redundant. I'm not complaining. The economy has collapsed in the best way. Don't need a job, don't need money. I can do what I want because everything else will get done without me. I know they'll be happy, all of them, us too. If you need to know something, know this part. I was a bonded Turian, still knew I wanted you. Always knew I couldn't do without you. Now I'm not bonded. Now I can bond to you. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not here because I have to be. I'm here because I want to be.
Was Kara ever jealous? Was it a problem?
No, never. I guess it'd be easy to think she'd be anxious about it privately, but she wasn't. She insisted we spend time together. She knew I needed you. She was much more gracious about outside influence than I ever was. She never said or acted like she was jealous. I think she felt guilty for keeping us apart, really.
I'd feel a little better if she was a bitch about it. What with how I treated her and Sanaa.
Yeah, me too, but she didn't. I took it for granted, really. I think she knew I would be obstinate as she ever was about Sonar. She won't talk about being Shepard. She talks about the future. If she has a mission now, it is to see people happy, and this could do it. She's guilty about Sonar. She's living for other people right now. I think the beacon fucked her up in ways she can't express. She won't talk about it. So on all of this, we wait. She's talking about immortality, so it seems she plans to stick around.
You guys haven't done the immortality thing?
She hasn't, he hasn't. I have. I knew you did, so I asked Sonar to give me the same deal. Whatever it was you had. Didn't ask. Seemed poetic for a leap of faith. Knew you'd catch me.
I look at you, and I can't believe that I can tell you that I love you.
You've been doing it every day since you were 15, right? You can say it out loud, and I can hear you now. I love you.
A deep breath in the biotic surge again, and then he remembered. Looking at you. Right, He stood up with a deep breath and pulled a case from an obscure drawer. Kara asked me how we'd be able to tell you apart. I had an idea. Turns out, I asked him if there was anything Vicarian blue. He didn't know of anything matching the description, but he was able to make it. Inside were hand-knapped hoops of deep Vicarian blue stone that looked like volcanic glass. They weren't that fragile, but they were that sharp. Russ had spent weeks learning the technique, making them. His hands were torn up, but the hoops looked good. Barbaric, and catching the light on the edges, the irregular chipped grooves, and the rich depths. RM. Ah. At the thought of the new name, Russ's heart squeezed hard and painfully. Blue flared from his fingertips and leaped 2 R's as R touched a hoop with a talon tip. There were 12 of them, each about 2 inches in diameter, quarter of an inch of flaked stone making up the hoop with a bridging thin bar at the top to connect through plate. He said, I thought. He stroked a fingertip along R's mandible, then one along the outermost fringe spike. If you wore these, no potential for mistaken identity. R's talon tip moved to the web of thin gashes along the visible side of Russ's palm.
Did you get those cuts making these?
Yeah. I didn't want to use metagel. Kinda hoping this scar over.
Put them on me, then I want to look at your hands.
Russ couldn't afford to have his hands shake. Placement careful and measured. 3 along each side of his mandible, 3 along each fringe spike. R holding still for the thin tool that punched a hole for each securing bar, except for R's hand moving to Russ's bent waist, talons sharp through clothing. Russ said, "Precision work here. That's distracting." R's talons flexed, and he said,
I have faith in you, or I can tell the story of why they're crooked and why you couldn't think in a straight line.
"Not to Kimmon."
Not yet, anyway. A few years. I won't forget by then.
Russ moved to the other side, R's other hand moving to his waist again. But R faced forward, didn't move, the concentration and focus bleeding some of the tension from Russ. That's his name. That's how he'll look. He'll be here in a few years. Somehow he's okay, and he wants to be here. Somehow she's okay, or she's not. But she will be, or maybe is now. And either way, she wants us to be here. I didn't steal him. I didn't hurt them. He was given. A miracle of 3 other people's efforts and generosity and love. He's really here. Oh, mine. His. Russ's hand started to shake after securing the last hoop to the plate, permanent and even. The box had been set aside and his hands were empty except for the cross-hatching slashes in his hide and the biotics that crackled there. R wanted to see his hands. That's all he could remember. Russ stepped in front of him, fell to his knees, and offered his hands into R's lap, looking up into his new face, eyes matching the paint matching the new adornments that glinted and swung and settled as R looked at him, still and always the most beautiful man he had ever seen, would ever see. R dropped his gaze to Russ's hands, traced a light talon along the deepest carved line in his hide, lifted that hand to his mouth, and licked along the stinging line, dragging a tooth along it to draw fresh blood. Subharmonics trilled in their throats. Russ's eyes closed over the sound of his own moan, then opened to watch the surreal moment. R smelled different, the way he had years ago, unbonded, no Kara in him or of him, no doubt, no hesitation, hardly any time between deciding he wanted Russ for his own and having that be real. For Russ it would take a little longer, that years-long obsession rising and flaring as much of a part of him as biotics, as his blood, twitching in his tongue as he imagined ours blood. His teeth ground together as he closed his eyes, thinking stopped. There was the feeling of R's tongue and teeth on his own, as he heard R's husky laugh, felt uncontrolled biotics, released blood, supplication. All his shyness and anxiety melted, replaced by rising heat and hunger, starting in his spine, moving through his body as he sat, panting, opening his eyes to watch again. The surreal sense faded as well, replaced by right. This was right. This was his right. Ah, bit along the rise of hide where his palm met his wrist, lifting his head to look at Russ with a possessive hitch to his smile that framed his tongue with Russ's blood on it, licking at his hand. The years were gone, the weight was gone, and all there was left was awe. This man had held his last thought before he slept. He had been intimate and integral to every dream, his first thought when he woke. If he was a fool, it was for this man, and right now. That was good. He dragged his R from the chair into his lap and growled, "Get our clothes off. Use your talons. Now." He had something to do himself, his mandible rubbing along the scent ridge that would be his, teeth along R's throat, sinking in points until blood flowed, feeling R's hands and talons pull cloth off them in shreds, making the choice now. Right now. This man. Mine. Plates spread and reverie washed through him, his body and voice built to full growl, the need for the demanded other half of right. He licked at R's throat until clothing was gone, plates spread and thighs flexing, shifting to move R's body. Russ bared his throat and wrenched R's head down with his fingers between his fringe hoop edges and teeth cutting grooves, blue trailing, flaring on his hide. He thought he'd have to say something, demand to bond, now. But the sounds from his R's throat and his own said everything he needed to know. Right now. Right now. It was happening, that choice, that decision in their hands and on their tongues and in the throats that was so much alike. Russ's hands closed around his R's cock with a newly bleeding hand groaning at the rush and shift of light-headed reverie. He lifted R by his hip spur, R's teeth digging into his throat and tongue along the bloodlines, Russ's cock finding his bondmate sharper, and sudden new reverie with the change, with the choice, immediately. Russ's biotics surged in the sound and shape of stasis. How he'd kept this man alive at the crucible. How he'd covered him in battle so many times. Now his. Always his. R's chest and waist was held to where they touched in stasis, the blue, burning palm of Russ's hand pressed tight enough to R's fringe to cut in deep. Russ's cock surged, twisted, and sought his long denied but never again denied bondmate, his head turning to catch sight of the gleaming of hoops, the wet trails of blue. R's tongue and mouth moving on Russ's throat, his talons scratching along lines of Russ's waist, and with a deep keen of need, Russ interlocked their mandibles, his mouth as close to R's ear as he could get, so he could hear and feel the pace of his breathing, the rumble and flow of subharmonics, the grip of biotics that would claim him, hold him, keep him. Mine. Right. Now. Kara woke up in bed with Garrus. Sennar had delivered them back to their farmhouse to wake together. Kimin was out with Kerplunk with another Sennar. Knowing there were potentially trillions of platforms with at least some Sennar in them somewhere was one thing, but it was jarring in a new way to see him without his glow. There was a symbolic and realistic withdrawal of him from her life. After the choice of duplication, he had retreated in ways that were odd and painful and soothing. He'd be there, but he had promised he wouldn't be a source of pain or mystery with the words. Assam, I will always be there when you call. Often be there because I wish to visit, to talk, to see this new place that is in some ways also my new home, the people, and the progress. If you need me for any reason, if any pain troubles you, even if you do not know the solution, call upon me. I will find a way. Thank you for your gift. Everything I have to give the sum in my open palm is for you and always will be. Never doubt that you are loved. Russ would be there, but he wouldn't be a source of pain. She wouldn't have to miss them. She had her button to her God, and Russ would be living here after he and the other Garrus found their way to not breaking the kitchen table in broad daylight. So that was good. This was good. These were all good things, and she did relax. Somehow the complications adding up to something simpler, something streamlined. This, Garrus, was entirely hers. No lost opportunity to mourn. She was entirely his in the same way. No emergency rising to keep them apart. No more surprises from Sennar. They wouldn't lose Russ to exhaustion or despair. Garrus woke soon after, at least part way, his arms reaching out to her and pulling her closer. With her secured, he whispered that he loved her, nuzzled at her throat, and fell back asleep. No starting awake or regret that he was the one that remained with her, not the one given to Russ. Mindlessly reassuring in ways words couldn't be. Her hand stroked along the height of his throat, tracing around the plates that dappled his hide in small discs. She imagined them like stepping stones in water, her fingers swirling around them, some magic spell cast by familiar movement and recognition through fingertips. He felt exactly the same to her. She felt exactly the same to herself, except for the cataclysmic change in her internal landscape. Some land masses split, and some merged. New continents and new exploration, some treacherous passages closed. She sank into a new contentment. Some strains and pressures, even some guilt, relieved. She watched the sunlight through windows, taking in the odd blend of ancient furniture with modern upgrades, a weapons workbench, and it was perfect in its clashing improbability. Home. Really home. Some sense of being potentially pried out of place, relaxing. She could stop wondering how Sennar was in her head. He would now be in the other hers head, and what remained was an open palm and unconditional love and innovation in her service. She could maybe let many things go that she'd held tight enough to leave deep impressions and pain. She could stop wondering if Russ went grief-gripped to bed every night, a Varen, his only potential company. She drifted back to sleep, allowing no worries, no anxieties, counting her blessings instead of her curses deliberately. She woke up later to Garrus's insistent voice at her ear.
Hey. Hi. I thought I'd run some diagnostics.
She grinned and said, "Back to work, huh? One of your toys?" He shook his head and tugged on her earlobe with his teeth.
You're not a toy.
I also don't have diagnostic routines to run. What are you looking for?
I could run some routines, check responses, that sort of thing.
Routine? Is that a good thing? We're routine?
That is the best thing. I'm so glad I'm me.
I'm so glad I'm me too. He rolled over with his speed and grace, and she was pinned beneath him, perfectly happy to be there, to see his smile, see his eyes. He rubbed noses with her and then touched his crest to her forehead. He kissed her, the pealing bliss of reverie starting to hum, harmonizing with her sense of home. And she agreed. Routine was excellent. His mouth traveled over her throat, her fingers along his fringe as he said,
I'm declaring irresponsibility. We're really going to do it. Stay in bed all day. We've got to work on that irresponsibility thing. It's the only aspect of our lives that we haven't really nailed down.
"That's not routine."
So we live some contradictions. We're both okay with that. Have to establish a pattern of irresponsibility somewhere.
She agreed with a moan.
I've been thinking, if this all worked out, and it seems it did, at least for me, about that immortality thing, promise me you'll be irresponsible with me. Let's take 2 more weeks out of our lives and earn the rest of it together. I want to stick around, see what happens, keep on running diagnostics. What do you say?
She agreed with another moan.